Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me today, I have a Wheeler.
Guten Abend.
And a reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you. Support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part 2 of our Crimson Vow set release. Reminder, with Jer stepping away from the podcast, it's just Wheeler and I, and we're trying something a little bit different. And thank you very much for the mostly positive comments. There's a couple of people who mentioned a little bit of feedback on, wanting to hear more voices and some different voices. We appreciate it, but for the most part, they feel like I have some big shoes to fill and I'm stepping up and doing an okay job. Now, let's talk about our set reviews really quickly. We do this at the top of every set review, but reminder that our set reviews are not exhaustive. We only talk about the cards that we're excited about, and we go through by color. Today, we're going to be covering black and red. And Wheeler, I want you to address some comments that we've had, because we do read all the comments, specifically about why aren't we more critical about the cards?
Yeah, check out this 2 birds, 1 stone that I'm going to pull. So, like you mentioned, right, we're looking at all these through the lens of Canadian Highlander. And so if we're trying to evaluate these cards in the grand scheme of things, if we're looking at it purely from like a strategic and critical lens, there would be like 3 cards, maybe 5 cards, and that doesn't really make much content.
Nope.
Because, let's try to compare everything to Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus and the cards that abuse them. It's not a fair fight, but it's okay because cards are often good with certain context applied to them. As, a blue spirit that has some disruptive ability, we will evaluate it and its place in a deck that wants other blue spirits with disruptive value. And so we're not going to, rip apart every single card. We're not going to get to something that is like, well, this is a really neat thing for blue spirits, but why the hell would you ever play that when you could play Grixis, you idiot? Like that's never a thing that we are, going to do. And that's not a thing that players do. I like playing garbage. Serge likes playing, well, it's rude to call somebody else's deck garbage. Serge likes playing Enchantress, and there are cards that are good in these decks that have a certain application that if you, put them on a chart in comparison to literally everything else in the game, they might fall flat. But how we are looking at them, they can, they have something to do. And to that extent, there will also be cards that we exclude because of that, like Hullbreaker Horror, a card that we didn't talk about.
And a lot of people wondered because they're like, that seems good, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's a 7 mana, 7/8, 5 blue. It's a Kraken Horror with Flash, and the spell can't be countered. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So obviously, this is just a big dumb Kraken. Where are we going to put it, right? It being a large fish does not mean that it's not going to find a home, but let's look at the potential homes. Do we want to reanimate this?
Nope.
Not really. Do we want to reanimate it in a combo-ish deck? Well, Tidespout Tyrant already just does that.
Yeah.
Do we want to cast a big flying or big flash thing in blue? Well, Torrential Gearhulk exists, and even that's already just kind of on the bench most of the time. Or it's not as frequent as it once was. And even for uncounterable threats, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I hope that kind of covers what we are looking to approach these cards with. And if there's an enthusiasm for everything, it's because
we love the format, right?
Yeah, Serge and I like Magic. This is an uncommon trait among Magic-related content creators.
Yeah,
but
there's already so much negativity out there that hopefully this comes across as a breath of fresh air,
So, yeah, I hope that gives a kind of a summation of what we're looking to do and why certain cards might not make it.
I thought you put that very well, friend.
Well, thank you. And I think you also put that very well.
Oh, shucks. All right. Well, let's get into the set review today. As we mentioned, black and red, so let's jump in with the Archghoul of Thraben. This is a 3-mana 3/2 zombie cleric for 2 and a black, and reads, whenever the Archghoul or another zombie you control dies, look at the top card of your library. If it's a zombie card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you do, put it into your hand. If you don't, if you don't put it into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. This seems very solid. This seems very fun and very powerful, specifically for the zombie deck. One of the big advantages Goblins has had as a tribal deck so far is the ability to refill its hand fairly reliably with Matron and some of the other sort of like tutor or card advantage engines. Traditionally, Zombies has gotten that card advantage through repetitive threats from the graveyard, but more cards in hand is always great. More cards in your graveyard is always great. 3 mana gets a little bit more expensive, but the advantages here, 1 is Ancient 2 mana, and 2 is a single black pip, which means it's easier to cast off acceleration, and zombie decks are moving away from being mono black, so this makes it a lot easier to cast early if you're in, green black with a black mold style of deck or a blue black zombie deck.
Yeah, I think it does a great job of reinforcing zombies' identity, which even, like you said, the recursion, but honestly, it wasn't as prevalent as you would imagine until like the past year, where it's
Yep.
really driven home. So it's nice to see that. Speaking of nice to see, I'm going to do everything within, my ability to not scream about this card for the next 50 minutes.
Which is all right. You do that.
I mean, if you want to set me up, I could just mute myself and go, "Oh my god, I can't believe! Are you serious?" I could freak out off mic if whatever works for you. But we're already here. Blood Fountain, Serge. Get this: it's 1 black. It's an artifact, and when it ETBs, you create a blood token, which itself is an artifact. This is important. And then Blood Fountain has an activated ability of pay 3 and a black. Sacrifice it. Return 2 creatures from your graveyard to your hand. This might be, and this is again where the context is important, where out of all the cards in the set, this might actually be the most broken of the bunch.
And that's so funny to me because I look at this and I'm like, wow, 5 mana to get 2 creatures back? Snore.
Yeah.
But the eggs player in you, your brain starts like, oh god, I could second sun this. Oh, it's artifact mana off my academy.
It's just so goddamn good with Black Lotus and the cards that you want to play with Black Lotus. It's an artifact there are 2 artifacts with 1, which is huge. That's a lot of mana. This means with any of the other mana engines that abuse artifacts, Cart Clan Ironworks, Urza, this is adding a heck of a lot more mana than you would expect. It is, obviously a Trinket Mage target. It lets you put cards from your graveyard from your hand into your graveyard, which is a pretty good for a deck that is looking to loot things from the graveyard, and then lets you draw a card. So this goes infinite with a variety of things. And then it also just returns any creature. So not just artifact creatures, that'd be nice by itself, but it can return any kind of Trinket Mage, any kind of Scrap Trawler, Mirror Retriever, Urza, Auriok Salvagers.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I love the way a combo player's brain works. Because, I'm sitting here with like 4-head level of magic, and I'm just like, okay, this is not even good and limited. And then you're over there with your 5-head and, and eggs, and be like, oh my god, it's so busted.
Yeah, it's like, this is the kind of card where I have to dig really deep and think of which black cards am I playing. Is Wishclaw Talisman now back into the point spread? Am I going to just play Time Sieve? The answer is yes to all of these, but yeah, wow.
Nice. Well, speaking of Blood Fountain, let me introduce the Blood Vial Purveyor. This is a 4-mana 5/6 vampire for 2 black. Like that ratio so far. It has flying and trample, also like that. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player creates a blood token, which we just talked about being good. And whenever Blood Vial Purveyor attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each blood token defending player controls. So this vampire is going to play a similar role of a lot of the very large demons with downside that medium black has traditionally had access to. So Abyssal Persecutor and the like. And the question you need to ask yourself when you're playing a threat like this is, do I kill my opponent before the downside kills me? And this is a pretty good clock. This is a very good clock. I like it. It's scary. I think this is the sort of threat though you have to evaluate what you're playing against, because if your opponent's playing Blood Fountain, you might be in a little bit more trouble.
Yep. It's kind of in line with these cards where it's like, if you really sit down and evaluate it, it's probably not a good card to play. However, if you're a deck with Ancient Tomb, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, and looking to high roll, it really doesn't matter. They're dying, right? They're dying right away, and there's nothing restricting you from casting it. Yeah. That's the biggest thing.
I like the thing about this is it's no Persecutor, right? You don't have to somehow sacrifice it to win the game. And technically, blood tokens aren't card advantage. It's not like you're giving them a clue. They have the ability to cycle. So,
Yeah.
but you're right. There's definitely a risk involved.
I think you strap on in to ride the demon
Yeah.
when you're
Choo
playing
choo.
this. But as for cards that, well, I mean, you might want to, buckle up for something like this. A Cemetery Desecrator. It's 4 black for a 4/4 zombie with menace. And when it enters the battlefield or dies, you exile another card from your graveyard. Or from a graveyard, excuse me, anyone's graveyard. And when you do, you choose one. Remove X counters from target permanent, where X is the mana value of the exiled card, or target creature an opponent controls gets -X until end of turn, where X is the mana value of the exiled card. Black and menace go together like peanut butter and jelly. There are no good blocks that you can ever make, and my god, can a reanimator deck actually just hardcast this card?
Yup. Yup.
It's this is one of those cards where I am so happy that it's, I might not have to play against it at a Canlander night in the like reanimator stompy decks or the big black decks, because the card will be so expensive due to commander players. And so Canlander players might not own one.
Yeah, there's no way I'm spending $10 on this.
$10.
You think this is going up? All right.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a giant mythic zombie with a whole bunch of abilities.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
And
really
so,
funny.
yeah, but I don't know. I'm excited to, at least as someone that does like Commander, I'll be grabbing a copy of this. But
Yeah, I got two decks I want to put this in: The Rock
mm,
and Recurring Nightmare. Yeah.
yowza.
Yeah. I'm not thinking like all in Reanimator. I'm thinking those grindy, attrition-y games where one Cemetery Desecrator is fine, but I want like 3 Cemetery Desecrators in one game, you know?
Yeah, I feel you.
All right, next up we have Concealing Curtains, which for a single black pip gets you a 0/4 wall with Defender. Man, that is a line I feel like I haven't read in a long time. Just a creature type wall. This wall has an activated ability. 2 and a black, you may transform Concealing Curtain, but only as a sorcery. And on the other side, we have the Revealing Eye. This is a creature eye horror. It's a 3/4 with Menace, which we just talked about being very good. And when it transforms, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player discards the card and then draws a card. Ooh, it cliques them. I hadn't actually seen this card before now. And you know what? I don't hate it. And I'm thinking of it specifically for a slower black X, like more control-y deck, maybe a Grixis, something that's okay taking its time. It wants to clog up the board. So if your deck is the sort of thing that wants to go turn 1, hand attack, turn 2, hold up counter magic, this card would probably be pretty home there. It plays a really good role of being defensive. It lets you set up behind it. And then when you're ready to turn around, when you're ready to be aggressive, when you're ready to try and resolve a threat on maybe on turn 4 or turn 5, that activated ability will let you sort of clear the way and possibly even be a decent threat. This card isn't tremendously exciting, but honestly, a one drop wall? Yeah, I don't hate it.
It's kind of funny how Grixis now has 3 0/4s between the egg that we got last set, Thing in the Ice, and this, that all end up being very annoying for aggressive decks. We're not giving you a whole bunch of life gain, but we will give you big booties.
Mm.
And one thing that you didn't touch on, Serge, is that unlike Thing in the Ice and the Smoldering Egg, is that this card has a lot more strength against blue matchups as well. Some would say that it's curtains for you. Anyways,
Oh,
Demonic
no.
Bargain is a sorcery for 2 and a blue. Nope, it's a black. You know what? I screwed this one up from the top. Keep all this in, by the way. The hubris is seeping. 2 and a black, it's a sorcery. Exile the top 13 cards of your library and then search your library for a card and put it into your hand and shuffle your library afterward. Well, the worst part about Grim Tutor, which is another 3 mana demonic tutor, is that, I mean, it deals 3 damage to you, but also it's black. And so it can be a little awkward if you're generating a lot of red mana, if you're playing like a blue-black combo deck where you want counterspell plus this. I think this card is, at its best in the combo decks that want more of a density on tutors that also, are either A plus B, or they're they have fewer cards like necessary for combo. Like I wouldn't play this in like a Sandy B or like a Flash Hulk
Or
deck.
you need a very specific one. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you either need a very specific setup of things. Like I will play this in a Storm deck where my only kill condition is Tendrils of Agony.
Love it.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm a very good player. I'll never exile it.
So it's like, I guess the evaluation here is what is the best tutor you're willing to play that doesn't cost points?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah. This is a genuine downside, but also I will always run that risk for every single time. Yeah, when you play combo, you can't be a coward. Like
Yeah.
you really can't. It's honest. I mean, I probably should have picked a nicer word to use, but realistically, cowardice is what causes most people to lose combo matchups.
Because they don't go for it.
Yeah, they just see someone with open blue mana or open stuff and they haven't been doing anything. They're like, I can't do it now. I should just cantrip and pass. And it's then the person just has like kill spells and like 4 drops they can't cast. They're like, oh my God, I get to live.
They're like, I can't believe I'm not dead here. Yeah.
Yeah, just go for it.
I would love the matchup between a control player and a combo player where you don't even see the board. All you hear is they're in a monologue. Right?
I think that's Yu-Gi-Oh, Serge.
Oh
like
God,
the
you're
TV
right.
show. Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Dread Fuge. Fuji?
Fugue.
Fuji. All right.
Dread Fuji.
This is a single black sorcery, but you can cleave it for 2 and a black. Reminder for cleave, you may cast a spell for its cleave cost, and if you do, remove the words in the square brackets. So, non-cleaved, target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it, square brackets, with mana value 2 or less, close brackets. That player discards that card. So for 1 mana, this card is worse than Inquisition of Kozilek. For 3 mana, this card is, I don't want to say better than Thoughtseize, because it's Thoughtseize, but you don't lose the life, but it costs 3 mana. And as such, I think this is pretty good. I don't hate this. Inquisition hits a lot. There are quite a few cards in this format that don't cost a lot of mana, as Wheeler was mentioning earlier. Recall, Lotus, a lot of the really good tutors and stuff like this. And if you're worried about most of the counter spells that you want to play around too, and if you're a deck that is trying to clear the way early, if you're a deck that's trying to interfere with your opponent's first couple of turns, I don't mind this. Are you slightly lower on this than me? I don't know. If I had to rate this, I'd give it like maybe a C+.
I'm actually really high on this
All right,
card.
okay.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting one because it's 3 is a whole nother category. Like it's a whole new world of card. But usually hand attack, especially early hand attack, you are clearing the way so that you can get something else down or setting yourself up. And so hitting 2s, be it mana acceleration, disruption, counterspells, whatever, is a-okay. And later on, when you want to double spell with this, I want to rip that counterspell in their hand and then play my big spell, or rip their counterspell and kill their thing, then for 1 mana, it's still going to be valid. And yeah, you can cleave it later on if you absolutely have to get something out of the way, and that's okay too. The great Robin Sorensen.
Oh, yeah?
He was talking to me about this card and about Highlander in general. And like 3 is the powerhouse number in our format. Oko, Opposition Agent, all that jazz, right? There's so many good 3s. And he was of the mindset that 3s are bad. Well, that's not fair. The 3s...
In what respect? Yeah.
Well, 3s are like, they're too chunky. He thinks that,
the future of Canlander is 2 CMC?
Well, it's that like, if you are going to play these very cheap, heads up hockey, attrition-y kind of cards, like if you're going to try to approach it more like vintage or legacy, where you're trading these very cheap, efficient spells, then like you want more 2s and 1s, and then why go 3 when you can go 4?
All right, so you're wait. Oh, interesting. 1, 2, 4. I thought you were saying that 3 was the new 4.
No,
but you're saying
no.
skip 3 entirely. 1 and 2 acceleration into like actual haymaker bombs.
He was preaching 4, 1, 2, and 4. And after getting my ass kicked by Urza Lord High Artificer in just straight up blue-white control, I was like, oh. Yeah, you know what? We should just be playing more of these Haymaker 4s that they've printed.
Interesting.
Okay.
And that makes... So, I mean, here's my next question then.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, the hand attack suite has been Inquisition, Duress, Thoughtseize, and if you're playing pretty heavy black, you could also splash for him to Torak. Is it now
Mhm.
5 discard spells is your starting point?
Yeah, I think my brain's been poisoned enough. Maybe it's the triomes, maybe it's the quarantine, where I'm always suiting up those five. Or always suiting up this five. The IOK, the base three, the him, and now this card.
Wow.
I
All
I
right.
I guess except for there's some situations where you just want the three if you're
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
combo
Yeah.
deck or whatever.
And well, you don't want black on like what turn reasonably can I get that, right?
Yeah, like this card gets a lot better with other hand attack spells, more so than the other ones.
Yeah. Sequencing, Inquisition or
Hmm.
Duress, which one do you lead with?
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah,
Cool.
it's a good one. Cool, cool, cool. Speaking of cool, how about I give you a 2 mana card that can kill planeswalkers, Surge? What do you say to
Ooh.
that?
Ooh, we haven't had that since what's that 2/1 vampire for black, sack and remove counters?
Vampire Hexmage?
Yeah, is this a new Hex Mage? What are we looking at here?
Graph Reaver. It's
Mhm.
1 and a black for a 3/3 zombie warrior with exploit. When Graph Reaver exploits a creature, destroy target planeswalker. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to you.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, like my initial read on this card was, I'm going to play this in so many decks
Yeah,
and just, the 1 damage is a bit of a pain, but you know what, it'll make up for it or I just exploit itself.
yeah,
And I had these decks in mind where I wouldn't end up playing it, but then I was just like, it's just so flexible.
yeah,
Like a 2 mana 3/3 that's easy to cast. I don't care if it deals damage to me. This thing will trade. It'll eat a bolt. It'll be annoying. It'll do something. And when it exploits a thing and kills their Oko or their Teferi, early on, or when I cast it off my Luris, then I'm feeling hunky dory.
So, obviously, it's an auto-include in zombies. It's an auto
Hmm.
goes great in Lurrus decks. Is this a card that you would play? I mean, obviously, Lurrus is probably in Death and Taxes and stuff like this, but is this, like, a good enough answer in that style of deck? If D&T
Yeah.
didn't have Lurrus, would you play Graph Reaver as an aggressive threat?
I think so. I think this card is going to prove to be very strong and at home in basically any deck with black that plays 14 or more creatures, Like even like a more modernized control deck with Murktide Regents and Gurmag Anglers and whatnot. I think I'm likely to just play this because it's such a free roll.
Heck yeah.
Hmm.
Next up, we have Headless Rider. This is a 3 mana 3/1 zombie for 2 and a black. When Headless Rider or another non token zombie you control dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Looks like I'm getting a lot of these 3 mana zombies here. This card's great. Very similar to the Archghoul of Thraben. This zombie does a fantastic job of generating pressure and advantage for you and giving you sort of that attrition and card advantage through multiple bodies. That being said, this one is a lot more vulnerable. Having 1 toughness is, well, tough, and that it'll be pretty easy to clear, and it won't be a very solid engine card. But that being said, if you get it down early, if you can accelerate into this on turn 2, and you're happy to just start swinging aggressively with your other zombies and just have them come back.
Yeah. It's kind of just a zombie for the sake of zombies.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying there. It's not a lord, right? This
Hmm.
isn't this isn't the sort of 3 drop that you slam down and all of a sudden your board gets qualitatively better.
Yeah.
If you've gone wide, pretty happy, but accelerating this out by itself is not as spicy as adding this to a board where you already have, 2 or 3 other zombies.
Yeah. It's worth noting that I think this is the first variant that is a zombie that when zombies die, it poops out zombies
Oh, it's not like a
as
graph
opposed
digger
to
or a human or anything like that.
yeah, like it's not a wizard that makes zombies if a thing dies, or like Zathrid Necromancer turns humans to zombies, Rotlung Reanimator does clerics to zombies. This is just very straightforward, and it's just, yeah, it's a zombie.
It sure is a zombie, eh? Yeah.
In the meantime, onto another tribe, vampires. Henrika Domnathi, 2 black for a 1/3 legendary vampire with flying. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Each player sacrifices a creature, you draw a card and you lose 1 life, or you transform Henrika. Henrika turns into Henrika Infernal Seer, which is a 3/4 flying death touch lifelinker. with 1 black. Each creature you control with flying, death touch, and or lifelink gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So this is like a night, like this is your Nighthawk commander.
If you needed Nighthawk Tribal.
Mhm. Giving the people what they want,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think this does enough that I could see it in a as a like role player up top in a deck, like a mono black control deck or a mono black or a black green mid range deck, because there's a lot of stuff with flying, right? There's a lot of stuff with death touch and life. Like that's basically every creature that your deck is going to play. All the way from the bottom of Mired Tritons up to Gaunty, Lord of Luxury, or Kalitas and whatnot. And I think that if you're playing a deck like that, you kind of need your 4 drops to have lifelink, to
Hmm.
have something to recover from all of the like trading down you've been doing with Ragavans or harsh mentors. And so the added like little utility of you don't have to immediately change it into a 3/4 if you're not super relevant, if you're not going to activate it or to get any kind of combat out of it is pretty nice. There's some genuine weaknesses that it gets bolted
Yeah.
pretty easily, but I don't know. I like this card for that kind of deck. Are you getting a hankering to play this at all? I know that you.
I'm a little bit lower on it if I'm honest. It's a lot of mana.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I just can't get over 4 mana 1/3. And it does impact the board a little bit. But like if you're casting this as just an edict, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
really sad. You're so far behind or there's cheaper ways to do that.
Yeah, I feel that. I think you likely need to be a bit more ahead with this one than something like Colitas.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I was more involved in vampire specifically as a tribe,
Sure.
I could be excited. And when you said role player, I meant I want to be in theme in a vampire deck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me get into character. Like I'm gonna cosplay as Enrica. It's strong. It's got a lot of words on it, and I mean, as we've seen from Questing Beast, more words often means better card. But
I think this is just a mythic rare from a new set. If you're
yeah,
able to do something with it, you're probably winning the game, but also it doesn't take that much time for your opponent to, well, deal with it.
yeah. I just think there's so many cheap answers to this card.
Yeah.
But it'll kill people. Next up, Mind Leech Ghoul. This is a 2 mana 2/2 zombie for 1 and a black with exploit. And when Mind Leech Ghoul exploits a creature, each opponent exiles a card from their hand. I like this. This is solid. I unlike our friend before, the what was it, the Graph Reaver.
Mm-hmm.
This one I don't think is going to see play outside of zombies, which is,
Ooh.
I don't think exiling a card is quite as versatile, but it does a pretty good job. There are a couple of creatures that do this job now. What is this? This is the third black creature 2-drop that comes into play and takes a card from your opponent's hand, but unlike cards like
Tidehall Skeller.
exactly, yeah, where they get it back, that card's gone forever. And is this, what do you think, the strongest Relentless Rat they've printed yet? Because, it's in a good tribe?
Now, Serge, I infamously despise Tide Hollow Skeller and Kitesail Freebooter.
Mhm.
I hate those cards. I hate playing them. They don't feel great.
I wasn't thinking Relentless Rat. Which is the rat I was thinking?
Ravenous Rats?
Ravenous? Is that the one?
That's the 2 mana 1/1 that just makes them discard.
Yeah. All right.
My favorite part about this is honestly the exploit. Like
You just want a creature that dies or kills something?
I just want something to sack my damn Academy Rector.
Oh, you like this in Sandy B.
Yeah, I think that this is actual factual, just the card that you want to add to Sandy B. Like there have been some other ones where I'm like, this could be, okie dokie in this version, or if you do this, but that deck likes having one card that is in line with that, a Mesmeric Fiend style. But this is the first one that we're okay just putting in the graveyard if we have to, just by itself, because that deck's already so recursive. But also, we can sack our own Academy Rector or our own Pattern of Rebirth card, and that's pretty all right. It's cheap enough that we could also. This one seems a little weird, but my Sandy heads know what I'm talking about. It's it's a sack outlet. It's an immediate sack outlet that can be Revel Art, and also something that you can, if you reanimate the Hulk, it's just another thing that you can then play and gobble up your meat and eggs immediately.
Well, I mean, it's not as good as the traditional Sacklets because, like, Sandy B This is the loop starter, not the loop continuer. Like, this is never replacing your Viscerous here, right?
Yeah,
Because it can't, because it's on ETB as opposed to being able to loop everything, which you need for that deck.
but those decks, like Sandy B is, it used to play the Tide Hollow Scellars or Sin Collector, stuff like that, but they just were not good enough. And, while they did provide certain utility while looping, certain protection, depending on what your kill was, because you just strip your opponent's hand, they kind of just didn't do anything outside of that. But
Right.
this is a version that gets to fill that role, can do something outside of it, and also is just easier to cast. And
Yeah, all
I
right. Yeah,
mean,
all right.
yeah. I think that this one has a slight bonus to it, and I'm more interested in playing something like this that I can then also abuse with, Unearth, Safi Eric's Daughter, Renegade Rallier, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah. And now to set you up for something sensual. Restless Bloodseeker. Surge.
Hmm.
This is 1 in a black for a 1/3 vampire. And at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life, make a blood token. And then you can sacrifice 2 blood tokens to transform it, but only as a sorcery. And when you do that, it becomes a 3/3 vampire. Oh, that says at the beginning of your end step, if you gain life, create a blood token and pay 4 in a black. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Serge,
Hmm.
do you remember that night we spent together? The
Oh,
cameras were on us.
yeah. And I wanted to die.
Yep. Mm. I too felt like I could die and happy. That's how I'm going to choose to read that statement. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this card for that deck, for that annoying as hell deck, is pretty strong. It does what you want to do. It provides a mana sink. It lets you cycle through all the useless cards that you're going to inevitably draw because, well, you're a primarily mono white deck or a white black deck.
I was actually going to say really quick, if people aren't familiar with that stream was, what deck are you talking about specifically
Oh,
here?
I'm talking about the Martyr Proc Soul Sistery kind of deck where we mostly leave our Johnny's Pride mates at home and instead we tilt a bottle of fine wine into a glass. Tilt being the important word
That's
here.
the win con. You're not winning a game of Magic. You are demoralizing your opponent until they concede.
Yeah, I mean, you usually win at the end in one way or another, but the concession is really what we're aiming for. Win game 1 and then time out the round. And yeah, getting this card active is pretty easy. You just have to gain life. That's kind of what your deck's based around. And then that mana sink will kill people. Like that is it's expensive. It's 5 mana to do, but if you have watched that stream or happen to play against the deck, the games go long.
Yeah, those games do not end quick for anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody. All right, let's do it, Wheeler. Let's just talk about stupid, sexy Sorin here.
Oh.
Yeah, we got Sorin the Mirthless. This is a 4 mana, 4 loyalty Sorin type planeswalker for 2 black black. The +1 ability reads, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card and put it into your hand. If you do, lose life equal to its mana value. -2, create a 2/3 black vampire creature token with flying and lifelink. And -7, Sorin deals 13 damage to any target, and you gain 13 life. And I think this Planeswalker does a pretty good job of meeting the minimum criteria you want a Planeswalker to do. Needs an ability that protects itself, which those vampire creature tokens do a great job of. It wants to provide card advantage in some way, which the +1 ability is great. I also like the difference between this +1 and traditional Bob, which is you may reveal it. So if you accidentally flip an Eldrazi or something greedy off the top, you don't have to dome yourself for 1,000,000. And its ultimate should win the game. And I think there's very few situations, unless you're playing specifically against Ben Wheeler in that last matchup, if you're doming somebody for 13 damage, that you're not just winning on the spot. So I think this is a fine, passable Planeswalker. That being said, there are a lot of very powerful 4-drop threats, and finding a home where those abilities will synergize is probably going to be more important than just calling this an auto include in any deck that wants to cast it.
Yeah, my thing, and this is Magic players really struggle with evaluating exactly like a 2/3 body. with a
Hmm.
2-3 bodies or 1-2 bodies with defensive abilities attached to them are consistently underrated, right? Or they're consistently not evaluated as strongly as they should be.
It's very strong. Yeah.
They're just so annoying.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
and they're not annoying until you realize like, "Oh, my unholy heat doesn't kill this." Interesting. Or, or oh, my Aven Mind sensor can't trade with this card. It blocks my goblin guide. Okay.
My
Cool.
Ragavan.
Yeah, exactly. It just like honestly, previous Sorens have shown that. The Soren from Cons of Tarkir, Soren Solemn Visitor, it pooped out 2/2 vampires, but its +1 was until your next turn, creatures you control get +1/+0 and lifelink. And like that is just a very large swing.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
And obviously there's a bit of a difference in buffing the team than just having one body that does it. But I can't help but look at this card and be like, I bet it's better than we think it is, and it's just going to be really annoying. And if it isn't, then, well, that's okay. I'll just reserve it to decks that want to cast Rampant Growths and play this on turn 3.
Yeah.
But oh my god, can we talk Toxrill? That was a bad joke. Toxrill the Corrosive, a 5 black for a 7/7 legendary slug horror. At the beginning of each end step, I repeat, each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug token, and then you can pay a blue and a black to sack a slug and draw a card. This is the kind of card where we kind of talked about it with the Cemetery Desecrator, the 6-drop, where we've seen some Reanimator decks pop up that are also just like, I will cast my Grave Titan. I will cast my Threat as well. I think Robin called them Reanimator Stompy, just because you're a Reanimator deck, but also here's a Rotting Regisaur. And one of the things that those decks lack is that, well, they typically don't get, Iona or Elish Norn, which I'm going to make the comparison of this card and Elish Norn. It's not an exact 1-to-1, but this is at least something that's castable in these decks that are usually black-blue or Grixis.
Yeah, like this isn't winning the turn it comes down like Elish Norn, but I can see how it would play a similar role.
Yeah, it's kind of like an Elish Norn hybrid in that it takes a bit of time before it really picks up. But people always are like, oh, I'll just deal with it and then I can get out of this lock, right? but it's just so difficult, and it just slowly will eat away at everything no matter the size, and comes paired with its own edict insurance. And so I'm pretty high on this card. I look forward to reanimating it, honestly. Also, it's not, how often do you get to say, here's my legendary slug?
All right, fair enough. Next up, we have Undead Butler. How did I end up with all the zombies? Whatever, it's an Innistrad set, it makes sense. Undead Butler is a 2-mana 1/2 zombie for 1 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. And when the Undead Butler dies, you may exile it. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I don't love this, Wheeler.
That's fair.
Do you like it? Do you like it in zombies? If this was a 2/1, I'd like it more. But as a 1/2, I don't quite think it does what you want it to do in an aggressive deck, or even in the sort of looping threats of zombies. I think I'd play this in Gladiator. I don't know if I'd play this in Highlander.
Yeah, I think this card kind of struggles from the setup of, I can think of a zombie variant that would want to play this. Like if you were a zombies deck that was more aristocrats oriented, you play, because then you get a couple more blood artist effects that are zombies themselves, but typically they're black-white.
But even then, it returns it to your hand, not to play, and the Undead Butler exiles itself, so it doesn't even do a great job of looping. I think this card might be a trap.
Yeah.
I think it's close. It has enough words that it does things that you think you want it to do, but I don't know if it actually has a home anywhere.
Right. I think that if you're making the decision to play something like zombies, you're already putting yourself in a bit of a, disadvantage off the bat. Not that the deck's bad, but there's a reason that you we're not seeing like, well, I 8-0'd with zombies at this big Canlander event. Here's my tournament report. And I mean, for, real world reasons aside, it's because the deck certainly has weaknesses. And so even if you decide to play zombies, then you would have to decide to play a version of that deck that is not as powerful as the stock list. And so this card isn't likely hitting the stock list, but it's probably in the variant. So you're just like further splitting, what you are looking to play, if that makes sense. And so yeah, I think this card is likely a trap. Speaking of trap, Vampire's Kiss. 1 in a black, it's a sorcery. Target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Create 2 blood tokens. We talk a lot about identity for decks, right? Like, why, if you're going to play a Rakdos aggro deck, you have to do something other than just being a bad version of mono red. And, what that looks like might not be playing hand attack or other cards that you would associate with black. And in the list of cards that people constantly list when it comes to, hey, Ben, have you thought about playing black red aggro with, what is it?
Bump in the Night?
Well, Bump of the Night's the big one. I was trying to avoid the meme.
I mean, honestly, there was a legacy deck that did really well, playing like 4 copies of Bolt, 4 copies of Chain Lightning, 4 copies of like Bump, right? Like that was a real deck for a bit.
Yeah, Sovereign's Bite is the big one, where somebody, I say somebody, but this is tens of people over the years.
Sure. Okay. So
yeah,
you got this like weird bad burn spell. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a bad burn spell, I guess is what I'm getting at, where you can try to paint this picture of like, well, I mean, the life gain might even this out, and the blood tokens, like, yeah, you do get a lot for one single card, but I would just rather have a more real card. I would rather just have like something that is consistently going to impact the game
or the board or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
I'm pretty low on these kind of cards, and I can't really think of a time when we're going to get enough of them that it's an okay thing to do.
And the last black card we're going to talk about today is the Voldaren Bloodcaster. This is a 2-mana 2/1 vampire wizard for 1 in a black. It flies. And it says, whenever Voldaren Bloodcaster or another non-token creature you control dies, create a blood token. And then, whenever you create a blood token, if you control 5 or more blood tokens, you may transform the Bloodcaster into a blood bat summoner. Oh my god. And they're like, you get a bat, and you get a bat. Everybody gets a bat.
Just jumping up and down on the cushions. Yeah. I think I love blood.
This is a 3/3 vampire wizard with flying, and at the beginning of combat of your turn, up to 1 target blood token you control becomes a 2/2 black creature token with flying and haste in addition to its other types. All right, so on one side you get a 2-mana 2/1 with flying. You know what? This card might be fine. I think it's kind of cute, and I don't know how often realistically you're getting a 3/3 on the backside, but like Vampire Interloper is kind of legit. And what if you had like Vampire Interloper that could block and just had nothing but upside?
Yeah, this is just like a totally reasonable 2-drop threat that also has synergies relating to, aristocrats.
Yeah.
Dare I utter the name? Like, you are, even if you don't get 5 blood, if you play this card out in an aristocrat style deck, you might end up with 3 of them. And have you seen 3 blood tokens, 4 blood tokens? That's not far-fetched. And have you seen the kind of cards you play in that deck? Wow, they're bad. And sometimes, you have your like 3rd Tukatung Thallid in your hand.
God, I wish I had any way to get this out of my hand for anything else. Yeah.
Please make this like a Planeswalker instead. Or, please give me a 2nd Blood Artist so I can actually do something. And this will help you cash in. And, that's a deck that also plays its fair share of cards like Bloodghast and Scrap Heap Scrounger. And so you can take advantage of putting cards into your graveyard and then getting things back. And it also triggers off of itself. Doesn't trigger off creature or tokens, which is kind of relevant, but also you're usually letting your non-token creatures die. That's the big thing. You want those to die first. So yeah, I'm pretty high on this card. It's good in the decks where you want to play it. Starting off red, we have an Is It card. Alchemist Gambit. It's one red red for a sorcery that has cleave, and the cleave is for 4 blue blue red. So again, when you cast the cleave, you get rid of the brackets. Take an extra turn after this one. During that turn, damage can't be prevented. Brackets. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. Brackets. Exile Alchemist Gambit. So you're either paying 3 mana for a Final Fortune style of effect, basically a time walk that says on this extra turn you're going to lose the game at end of turn, or you're paying 7 mana for just a time walk. And then you have the exile attached to it as per all modern time walks. I think I'm good. Like, I think we have enough time walks.
Wait, what? Hold on. What did you just say?
I don't know. Like, I love a good Final Fortune. One of my favorite decks with those was I played a Goblins list with Time Walk at the point spread, and I played all the 3 2-mana Final Fortunes. And so there are 3 of those at 2 mana. So I don't know if we need a 4th at 3, and I don't know if we need another big Time Walk that exiles itself at 6 or 7. And those 2 like different types of cards don't really intersect. Usually play one or the other. So not super high on this card.
Next up, we have Ancestral Anger. This is a 1-mana sorcery for a single red pip that reads target creature gains trample and gets plus X plus O until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of cards named Ancestral Anger in your graveyard plus draw a card. So obviously, all of the text on this card is basically irrelevant other than target creature trample, and this is very good specifically in the prowess style decks where you're trying to cast a bunch of spells, make your creatures get as quickly as possible, and honestly, you'd think draw a card is one of the more important lines on this, but trample puts in a lot of work. And if you've played standard in the past couple years or modern and you're used to the Is It Phoenix style deck, this card is going to find a home. Is It spells, maybe Mardu decks that want to play Berserk, Muscle Wizards.
Okay, well, for the record, I think the +1 is also pretty relevant.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think that if it didn't also boost the power, this is likely just kind of staying at home because we have, or for very niche decks, because we have Crash Through that already does that.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
But yeah, it's wild how many of these trample pump spells, blitz cards that we've received.
Can we come up with a name that is cantrip trample? Cantrol? Tramp trip?
Okay.
Maybe not. Let's move on.
Maybe not. Cemetery Gatekeeper, 1 in a red for a 2/1 vampire with first strike. When it enters the battlefield, you exile a card from a graveyard. Whenever a player plays a land or casts a spell, if it shares a card type with the exiled card, it deals 2 damage to that player. This is symmetrical. Can you hear the sound in my voice that, of how relevant that Eidolon of the Great Revel is symmetrical?
Yeah, Zozu the Punisher.
Yep.
God, I have wanted to make Ankav Mishra Zozu the Punisher a deck in Highlander for so long, and it's always sucked, specifically because Zozu cost 3 and was also red.
Mm-hmm. This is hateful. Why does it's so good? It's so free.
Yeah.
Like, why does it have first strike? Why does the XL not target? Why is it not double red? I have all these questions that are just answered by, the response, it's mythic, Ben. It's mythic.
That's a really good card.
Yeah.
We got another Planeswalker. Let me introduce you to Chandra Dress to Kill. This is a 3-mana, 3 loyalty Chandra type Planeswalker for 1 red, or Chandra mana, basically. The +1 ability is add a red. Chandra Dress to Kill deals 1 damage to up to 1 target player or Planeswalker. There's a second +1 ability, which is exile the top card of your library. If it's red, you may cast it this turn. And -7, exile the top 5 cards from your library. You may cast red spells from among them this turn, not even for free. You just can if you want to. And you get an emblem with whenever you cast a red spell, this turn deals X damage to any target where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. And that's why those spells aren't free, is to make that emblem relevant. I think this Chandra joins a long list of other 3-mana Chandras that just doesn't quite do enough. Notably, the damage doesn't go to creatures, so it doesn't protect itself. The card advantage is kind of neat, but that's more relevant the turn after. Like 4-mana Chandra that gives you that card advantage has a little bit more board impact when it lands. And so this is cute, but I don't think it's going to see a lot of play in our format.
See, See, I was on the case of I just really dislike Chandra as a character, and I'm kind of sick of seeing her. And so before I was just like not willing to give this card any attention
Okay.
because I was just like blah blah blah, not worth it. But now that I've thought about it a bit more, I still don't like her as a character, but I do like this card.
Really? All right.
Yeah. So I think that the fact that she can add mana immediately, which in a deck with a bunch of red spells, you play this, tick it up, you can peck off a planeswalker or a player. That part doesn't matter as much on the turn you play her, but it'll be somewhat relevant. Also makes playing her against opposing planeswalkers that have, potentially downtick to deal with your threat. But you just add a red, which means you can bolt, Unholy Heat, Chain Lightning, any red one drop, protect yourself.
A point against this one compared to other Chandras, you can't play lands off of her exile.
That is true. I don't care.
Oh,
I don't think I don't
all right,
think
all right.
I mean that's relevant for, I think this card is more aggressive, for the record. Very much an aggressive card, or like a low curve aggressive that can maybe pivot to mid-range. But I'm trying to kill my opponent as quickly as possible or as reasonably as possible. And I feel like this is just something that can help, it can do that, and can do that in a way for decks that might want to cast a Hazoret.
I was going to say, what deck? Because, like, this isn't red deck wins. I don't know if you're playing. Are you playing this in medium red?
I think I'll play this in medium red for sure. And I even think that it's playable in red. I think there's got to be a version of red deck wins that just casts Goblin Chain Whirler, like.
But this isn't Goblin Chain Whirler.
No, but I'm using that as an example for, like, we cut the Jackal Pups and start playing the broken cards they printed from 2018 to 2020, which are
Sure, like
going to
all
be a
killer,
bit.
no filler red.
Yeah, give me that Tor brand. Give me that
Yeah.
Phoenix of Ash. Cards that are less susceptible to Lightning Helix and Thragtusk is basically where I'm going. So yeah, I like that in there, but I still I haven't read her ultimate, and I don't intend to.
I think that's fair.
Right. Speaking of fair, here's Change of Fortune. It's 3 and a red for a sorcery. You discard your hand and then draw a card for each card you've discarded this turn. It's real easy to play. It's not quite Wheel of Fortune. It's not quite Windfall. But buddy, if you get yourself a Scourge Familiar, you got a stew.
I'm going to need you to remind me what a Scourge Familiar is.
Well, it's 4 and a black for a 3/2 flyer that says discard a card, add black to your mana pool. That's a pretty broken ability, and I think is a card that is kind of asking to be, broken. And so I think this is a card that will kind of go along with other wheels or supplement that style of combo deck, or potentially like a mono red storm list that we've seen pop up with Underworld Breach in tow.
Next up, we have Curse of Hospitality. This is a 3-mana enchantment or a curse for 2 and a red. Enchant player, like most curses do. Creatures attacking enchanted player have trample. Okay. And whenever a creature deals combat damage to enchanted player, that player exiles the top card of their library. Till end of turn, that creature's controller may play that card, and they may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast. So red has recently been getting a few effects like this. We have Robber of the Rich being, I think, probably the best example of it, which is card advantage by playing your opponent's cards. Notably, also can't play lands off of it. Wait, no, may play that. Yeah, no, they can't play lands. Okay. Huh. My biggest complaint with this is it's not a creature.
It is 3 mana.
If you're, yeah, exactly. Like, what if you're an aggressive deck that is trying to, like, the reason Robber of the Rich is good is it lets you put your foot all the way down on the gas pedal, be really aggressive, and you make up the card advantage. It's encouraging you to attack to do that, which is kind of what Curse of Hospitality is saying. It's like, hey, if you attack, you'll get your cards back. And that way, even if you do bad attacks and they block it or you lose a creature from that, you should be able to keep the pressure up. The problem is, in order to get Curse of Hospitality into play, you have to take your foot off the gas pedal for a turn.
Or you just have to play Ancient Tomb.
You like it for Ancient 2 mana? It does make the creatures on the board better, but yeah. I always worry about effects like this.
I think that this is the kind of card where if you didn't have the first ability, or if you didn't, like, it's 2 cards that have been stapled together,
right,
basically,
yeah,
that are powerful effects, but you would have never played them by themselves. And they've also received the, like, quality of life update from modern cards that says, we want you to play these things. And then pair that with an easy mana to hit. I think this card does enough altogether, especially if, for medium red or even like a red-green deck, like a Gruul deck that can get this out with Dorks or Double Moxen, and then later use those mana Dorks to refill not refill their hand, but refill the pressure.
So I'm going to compare this to 2 cards. We have Phyrexian Arena, which is 3 mana, guaranteed you draw a card each turn and you lose a life. Our Coercive Portal, which is a 4 mana artifact that no downside, you just draw a card, an extra card each turn. And there's a significant downside to this, which is if you don't have a board, it does nothing.
Yes. But if I have a Goblin Rabble Master.
Oh, yeah. I guess the upside of this is pretty huge. Yeah.
And my opponent has a token, I don't care anymore. Which I think that's pretty big, especially because medium red goes wide too, right? You have all these token generating creatures, these PZs, the pyromancers. Yeah.
No, you're selling me on it. The upside of this is like the ceiling of this card is absurd compared to some of the other ones. The floor is manageable.
Yeah. You high roll with it in a deck that wants to high roll.
All right, I'm warming up on this card.
Yeah, well, warm up to this because you're going to have to. It's going to drag you out. Dominating Vampire. 1 red for a 3/3 vampire. When it ETBs, you gain control of target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of vampires you control. Untap that creature, and it gains haste. And this is only for that turn. Double red is a bit of a, this is the downside of playing this card in the vampire deck, is it's double red on 3. Which might be a little awkward. And that's where all the bad stuff ends. This card is pretty strong in a vampires deck. And to somebody that made 3 different vampires decks over the weekend, I was shocked. Like, finally getting to see the spike in card quality was wild. Absolutely wild. Like, no Vampire Nocturnus.
Oh.
It's too slow.
Go with me on a journey here. Does this Kiki combo at all?
You would need to have a whole bunch of vampires in order to do that.
We're not quite there. I just see untap and haste, and I'm wondering if there's a combo application with this that we might be overlooking.
Well, I mean, if you played Kiki Jiki in a vampires deck, vampires makes a bunch of tokens.
All right. You know what? I want to see the community come together and give us vampire Kiki. Let's see what happens.
God.
All right. Next up, we have Kessig Flame Breather. This is a 2 mana 1/3 human shaman for 1 and a red. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, deal 1 damage to each opponent. Hey, Wheeler, what if Gutter Snipe was way easier to cast and had 3 toughness, even if it did less damage every time you cast it? Would you be pretty down with that?
Serge, I'd be absolutely down to clown. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I don't hate this, and I think there's a group of people who've always tried to make that deck work. And I think this might be one of the easier versions. Am I talking to one of those people who's been trying to make that deck work?
You could just say Nelson. They'll know who you're talking about. You could say Nelson. Electrode will get thrown up on the screen.
Yeah,
people understand.
I mean, I don't know how real that deck is. I think we're getting a density of it though, especially of these like very cheap threats that care when you cast spells. You got your Drakes, you got your Pingers. And this card might have a home in there. Honestly, I like 1/3 a lot better than 2/2 in that particular style of deck. I like that stat line. We were mentioning this earlier, how with Blood Fountain, how you kind of want to be defensive with these decks as you set up. And a 1/3 lets you block Goblin Guide pretty well, you know?
Yeah. It's also worth noting, a lot of these are shamans. And a lot of these are in the same, like they're all red too, right? Almost all of them are red, mono red. And I'm not saying we have enough support for a green-red shaman combo deck. We do. I had a wild weekend, Serge. We don't have time to get into it, but there are a lot of good cards.
The wheels are spinning. Is that what I'm hearing right now?
Yeah, the wheels are spinning. They've made a lot of really good stuff. This next card might not be one of them, but Kessig Wolfrider. It's 1 red for a 1/2. It's a human knight with menace, and it has pay 2 and a red, tap, exile 3 cards from your graveyard to make a 3/2 red wolf token. If anybody has ever tapped a Grim Lavamancer, they know how quickly those cards can run out unless you're just so infinitely ahead of the game. And that's 2. So 3 is so many cards. This is this is asking way too much. But I think this does have a home in exactly 1 deck.
Oh?
Can you guess what that deck is?
Wolf Tribal?
Night Tribal, Serge, Night Tribal.
It was right there on the tip of my tongue. That was my second guess. That was my second guess.
Out of the 3 possible guesses. So this was kind of a eureka moment. Again, weekend, hell of a weekend, where Icoria's, or no, sorry, Icoria,
Innistrad, yeah.
Eldraine.
Oh,
I had a wild weekend. Eldraine is one of the most broken sets of all time, right? And it was a set that had the tribal theme of knights. There were a lot of
yeah,
knights.
yeah.
And if you look back to all the knights in the history of Magic, there are good ones. There's a hell of a lot of lords, hell of a lot of cheap enablers, and a lot of, high-ish quality cards that you could play. But they kind of need a bit more support. And they just happen to get a whole bunch of support and the reinforcement from one of the most broken sets of all time. And so I think there is a knight tribal deck that's out there that is
Huh.
quite good, that it's really only lacking in one drops. And so while this isn't the best one drop in the game, it is a one drop knight within the colors with a keyword that is pretty cool when you have lords or equipment,
Yeah,
which you probably
yeah.
do for this deck. And then you have the longevity of being able to build up your board if you get, if this is post Wrath or whatever. So
Neat.
yeah.
Keep knights on your radar, I guess. That's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, every set has at least one. So let's talk about the big red dragon in this set. We got the Mana Form Hellkite. It's not even that big. It's a 4 mana 4/4 for 4. 2 red. It has flying. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX red dragon illusion creature token with flying and haste, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. I think this card, again, wants to live sort of with the Kessick Flame Breather and the like red blue spells matter archetype that is always kind of there, but not quite there. And this one's a little trickier. Wait, you're just going with big red, aren't you, again? Oh, God, right. You can make a planeswalker off of this. You cast this on turn 3, and then you follow it up with, okay, never mind. This card's absurd in medium red.
I want to play this in a deck with either planeswalkers or force of wills or actual factual counterspell, factor fiction.
This card's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. Importantly, because you're not the only one, and it's probably a factor because they flip a coin with how they want to word this. You exile it at the beginning of the next end step, not end of turn.
Yeah. Oh my God, all your counter spells.
This is literally EOT FOFYL. End of turn factor fiction, you lose, but because of dragons.
This does a pretty great impersonation of Shark Typhoon.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you actually get that on the board, but like this is the dream. This is a livable dream of what everyone wanted Shark Typhoon to be.
It makes Shark Typhoon look like Giant Shark. A 6 mana card from the dark. It's not very good. Yeah, this card's absurd. I think this card is cracked in half.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you for giving me a second to correct myself. I'm like, wait a second. As I was talking, I was reading it again. I'm like, oh, never mind.
This set does that to you a whole bunch. And here's another great example. Reckless Impulse. It's 1 in a red. It's a sorcery. You exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So much like we've seen other versions of this kind of effect in the set, this is, if you don't play these cards immediately, that's okay. You get to wait until your next turn and you can play them, meaning you can play lands off of this card. I think that this card is mostly going to be at home in the mono red storm deck, or like that spell slinger deck that you mentioned, which it exists. The truth is out there, but I can't really see myself playing this in like a red blue deck or a more like normal #normal archetype. Especially because, we just got 2 really strong cantrips.
Yeah, they just have better draw spells already, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you need to be playing this due to the limitations of the colors of your deck or the limitations of the control that you have, your self-control.
I just got to exile cards, Wheeler.
Yeah, I feel you.
Next up, we have Volatile Arsonist. This is a 5 mana 4/4 creature human werewolf, notably not legendary. For 3 red, it has menace and haste, and whenever it attacks, it deals 1 damage to each of up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target player, and or up to 1 target planeswalker. And it's got the daybound, nightbound mechanic, so at nighttime it transforms into the Dire Strain Anarchist, which is a 5/5 with menace and haste. And whenever it attacks, it deals 2 damage to up to 1 creature, player, and or planeswalker. So downside, this card is 5 mana. Upside, this card does a lot when it hits the board. This does a very good impersonation of a lot of very good dragons. And instead of flying, it has haste. I like this. I like this as a top end threat in a medium red deck. I want to. Anytime I say medium red, I feel like I have to check in with you. But I think this does a pretty good job.
I'm so conflicted because I'm with you. This does so many things. It might as well read 5 mana, murder your opponent.
Yeah, yeah. Clears their clique.
It's so big. It does so much, but that is such a competitive slot.
Right. Does it do enough in comparison to what else already exists? Right.
Yeah, and chances are, it does. It kind of has this weird thing of like we Medium Red could move away from Cavern of Souls naming dragon to now Cavern of Souls naming human because you just have all these mom and pop Thopter shops, Magus of the Moon. Of course, I'm using examples that came out half a decade or more ago, but you get the picture. You have a bunch of stuff that you want to push through that doesn't necessarily have to be a gigantic dragon. Where I think this one will show up is that, well, the flip side, it's a 5/5. That survives a wildfire surge. You want a big red with this bad boy?
Oh.
Yeah.
I have been known to wildfire once or two in my magic career.
And big red's being known to not be able to do anything on their turn. So Nightbound, here we come. But closing out with a card that is a little less exciting, but ultimately I think will make a larger splash. Apologies to the arsonist. Is Voldaren Epicure. It's 1 red for a 1/1 vampire. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and you create a blood token. I think this card's pretty good. It comes with a shockingly large amount of value. The fact that it's a vampire means that I'm probably going to play this in vampires. In fact, it's in my vampires list. But it's also just like, it does so much. It's a body that domes your opponent immediately and then also lets you cash in any excess lands you have or dig for lands, letting you keep greedier hands.
Like, are you comparing this to Thraben Expector, sort of? Just like an undervalued 1-drop that actually has a lot of versatility?
Yeah. I think I think so. I think that this card will prove to be a bit better than it looks on the front.
All right.
And will potentially, find a home in more than just mono red, maybe even black red, but maybe even a combo deck, honestly. Like it's cheap enough and domes people out. I'd be sure this might just be a worthwhile flash haul conclusion. Who knows? As a part of the package, but I digress. Yeah. This card, I mean, modern players seem to like it, so, and they've never been wrong.
I'm just shocked that 2 of the cards specifically that you've talked about today are commons that deal with blood tokens, and maybe that just talks about blood tokens being more powerful than I think they might look.
Serge, I could do a TED talk on blood tokens and why they're messed up. And that only a quarter of that TED talk would be me chewing out any slack-jawed Twitter person that says, but they're just worse clues.
I was literally going to say, like, I think a lot of people just imagine them to be worse clues, but I think those people also undervalue just how valuable putting cards in the graveyard is in our format.
And 1 is less than 2. In fact, it's half as much.
It might be half as much, but it significantly more than, I don't know.
I liked where you were going with this. We don't even need to close that. It's fine.
Don't need to land it. All right. So that's going to do it for part 2 of our set review. Look forward to part 3, where we're going to cover green, gold, lands, and artifacts. And of course, we'll have some closing thoughts on the set and all. My name has been Serge. I've been joined by the wonderful Wheeler. We appreciate it. As always, in the comments down below, please let us know if you think we've missed any cards, anything you'd like to hear our thoughts on. This podcast has been brought to you by your support with the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time. Bye.